I was a part of a spiritual organization for 5 years and had a master who guided us. I left the organization 1.5 years back, and the inner circle that was a part of the organization 2 years ago. I left because I felt that it was a cult and there was blind obedience needed. Though physically I'm not there, still there are so many thoughts related to that place which is keeping the mind cluttered. I want to let go of all negative emotions and thoughts related to that experience, but finding it challenging as there's a deep conditioning. Please guide on how to let go of beliefs, ideas which one collects and attaches itself to in these kinds of experiences. Your teachings have helped me to live again after that traumatic experience. Thank you for lighting the flame. I already mentioned the other day briefly about how spiritual teaching that comes through a person and might be actually true can get mixed up with ego because the vehicle is immature and undeveloped. So that's often the case. An additional thing with any groups and organizations is that a group develops after a while. This is not generally known. A group develops a group ego. It may at first be a wonderful group where it actually can be very helpful to be with others who are also endeavoring to accelerate or deepen their spiritual awakening. But if you are in a group, the danger is that a group ego, because the individual members of the group are not all free of ego, obviously, and the ego surfaces more in certain situations than in others. It may subside in certain meditation sessions and teaching sessions. It may subside, but when people interact with each other again, the ego is there, and after a while, it could take a year, 2, 3, 4 years, a group ego develops, and every person, every member of that group gets drawn into and identifies with the group ego, which means their personal ego, to a large extent, disappears, and it feels wonderful. So they feel they no longer have a personal ego whatsoever. They're totally selflessly dedicated to the group, not realizing that unfortunately the group is an egoic identity that sooner or later will come into conflict with its environment or with other groups. And that's the danger. It can be very helpful to be with others in a group, but there's also a great danger associated with it, especially if you live together in a community or commune. I already mentioned certain things to watch out for in a teacher. I mentioned last time, such as sex relations with many disciples, such as outlandish claims as to where he or she comes from or what his mission is. I descended here 30 years ago. I suddenly descended here from the 10th dimension. And I'm here to save not only this planet, but the entire galaxy. A lack of compassion in the teacher is also a sign that the ego is there. Telling people what to do, who to marry. Okay, you're going to marry that person tonight, and you're going to marry that person. That's how it's supposed to be. I hope you don't do it. So it is dangerous. You need to be very cautious. What the most confusing and dangerous thing is, the ego, usually in the teacher, who is the center of the cult, if it is a cult. One of the signs of cult is, of course, if you leave, you become everybody's enemy. So it's difficult to leave because you will immediately be condemned, and sometimes they even physically prevent you from leaving, but even if they don't physically prevent you from leaving, it is implied and understood that the moment you leave the group, you are excommunicated and nobody will communicate with you. And even you might have had the closest friends you thought within the group, the moment you leave they don't speak to you anymore. That's so not being able to leave or that is a very, very clear sign. There have been countries like that. There have been entire countries that became cults. Perhaps North Korea is still a country that you cannot leave. You want to leave? No, you're not allowed to leave. Russia was like that in the past. China even was like that. Many communist countries, you could not leave. East Germany, communist East Germany, people were being shot. Every month there were several people being shot. They were just trying to cross the border out into West Germany. They were being shot, just trying to leave. You can't, because the entire country is a cult. So the danger is that the teachings, which for a while may remain relatively pure in the exclusive teaching situations, but the immature, the still growing ego in the teacher is being inflated by all the projections that it receives, and it identifies with the spiritual power if there is an opening in this human being that is in teaching situations, he or she has the ability to access the unconditioned consciousness of the presence. And when the teaching situation finishes, it's gone again. It's like the clouds part for a while and then they close again. But after a while, the growing ego of the teacher even begins to contaminate the teaching situations. I've observed this many times. And then truth and falsehood get mixed up in a teaching situation. And that becomes extremely confusing for the participants. They cannot disentangle anymore what is true and what they recognize as, this can't be true. And then he says, no, at some point, people may realize that let's say it's a he has a different sex partner every week, and each one is told that you are the one who is destined to be my companion, and I will awaken you through my tantric miraculous practices. And then they explain it when they have to talk. Finally it gets exposed and say, well, this is all divinely ordained. This is nothing to do with me personally, and although it may look sexual, it's just a very small, all kinds of explanations. And then you're like, can I believe this or can I not believe this? But on the other hand, he speaks so much truth. Extremely confusing, but then increasingly, the teaching situation gets more and more contaminated with ego, and then you very often end up with almost nothing but ego. So beware of this. And if you have been a member, then perhaps what I'm saying here can help you understand. There are people who then leave an organization like that after years of investing their whole life in it, and then they despair and they say there is all that spiritual stuff of awakening is total BS, because see what happened. Now that is not correct. That you're very confused. You have to see that even in certain organizations that are clearly egoic, there may still be or have been some truth operating in, and that's why it's so confusing. So don't, as the famous expression goes, don't throw out the famous baby with the bath water, if you know that. Watch for the warning signs, and if they are there, then remove yourself. And if it's in your past, you may be able to recognize what was true and valuable and what was egoically contaminated and untrue. So it wasn't necessarily all false. It was a mixture of spiritual truths that became increasingly contaminated with ego. So now you don't need any groups anymore except casual get-togethers like here. This cannot possibly be called a cult, can it? Although maybe some newspapers, they would call anything a cult, but you're free to leave. You're free to see anybody you want to see, any other teacher. I have not arrived here from a wormhole from the Andromeda galaxy. I haven't invited anybody to my room tonight, but last night. I haven't condemned other teachers, as far as I remember. Well, I only mentioned that I met two in whom I detected some degree of ego. All the others were fine, and I haven't mentioned any names.